You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, and exposing the hardcore facts about the Watchtower Society. Disney.
Well, good to see so many people coming in on a Sunday afternoon. My name is Rick Farrer, and I'm up here in Boston. And boy, we have a nice day today. Today's about 42 degrees, nice and sunny. Boy, it warmed up a lot. Let's hope it can stay warm for a while. Well, we thank you for coming in. We have got this program titled Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses Share Their Story of Being in the Watchtower. So we have our host of the program. Her name is Anne Marie. She's an ex-Jehovah's Witness out of California. Hello, Anne Marie.
Hello, my brother Rick. Happy 20th anniversary and happy 16th Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's even hard. I can remember, actually, the very first day we started. I do have a good memory. I do. I can remember the very first day we started. And we actually we actually started on a Sunday, even more than a Saturday. We started out as a Christian network, you could say. It was the Upper Room Ministries. And we started 20 years ago today, as a matter of fact. And the neatest thing about it is we're still here. And we have never given up or out. We're still moving in the right direction. And the only sad part about it, there is a sad part about it, is the fact that I was hoping we really could get more Jehovah's Witnesses who have left, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, to come to Christianity. That's the only bone I have to pick here, Anne Marie.
I can understand that. I just wish that the witnesses could see it. But one by one, two by two, actually a few thousand, I heard on Reddit, just left within a month, a few thousand. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm so happy for what you do.
Well, the thing is that's really at the very outset, when I left the Watchtower, of course, as I always say, Satan kicked me out in 2005. When I left the Watchtower, I had a real desire to want to know the real God of the Bible. I knew the Watchtower was teaching the false God, but I had a real desire to want to learn the real God of the Bible. I didn't want to walk away from God because I walked away from the Watchtower. But I talked a little bit about mysteries last night. And every one of us has a mystery. Every one of us has a mystery about some of our relatives. Why did they ever do that? About certain people that we know. We all have mysteries that have never been solved. And one of the biggest mysteries that I find in my life, and I still can't figure it out, why, in goodness' name's sake, people would go to the meetings, Jehovah's Witness meetings, upwards of 3 times a week when you and I were witnesses, Anne Marie, 3 times a week, out in service, go to all the conventions, bring our Bibles, have a book bag, study the Watchtower, have Bible studies with people in the field. And yet when you leave the Watchtower, you have nothing to do with God. That is a mystery to me. We would think that people would say, gee, I love God. I want to really know the real God of the Bible. And that is something I just cannot, of all the different things I think about here at the Six Screens, that is something that's unsolved, Anne Marie. What do you think?
My brother, I've heard what you just said many times, and many people who do love God and stick to the Bible and learn the real truth feel the same way you do. Personally, I didn't turn my back on God. I always felt that God cared about me, but I just didn't want to hear anything that triggered Watchtower memories. For almost 14 years, I didn't want to hear meeting or magazine or service or long suffering or prayer or God, everything was a trigger if it connected to the Watchtower. But here's the thing, is that Watchtower is an evil, dictatorial, tyrannical mind control cult, and they do all their lies and twisting of the truth and do all their horrible things in the name of God. Like, this is God's will. We represent God. So God, in the Jehovah's Witness mind, when they leave, if they don't want anything to do with God, it's because everything that they suffered, all of the trauma, the emotional trauma, the feeling of never being good enough, the feeling of if I screw up, God's going to kill me. All of that was drummed into our head that if we failed in any way, God doesn't love us anymore. We're dog meat, we're bird food. And so it makes total sense to me because I didn't see God as a loving, forgiving God only in the Watchtower, only if I was good enough. But now that I'm quote unquote bird food, God doesn't love me. God doesn't even hear my prayers. In fact, that was drummed into my head too. So I didn't turn on God. I just closed the door because I couldn't deal with it. And I think I'm not the only one. I hope that makes sense to you, my brother.
Oh, no, it does, because I know that Reddit forum that you go on, there's a number of subreddit ex-Jehovah's Witness sites that you probably go on, the one that has the most people. And I go on that one a lot too. But what I find, and in fact, I'm even going to throw another little caveat into the mix here. It's one thing to even leave the Watchtower and say, gee, I've been so spiritually abused that I don't want any part of it. But what I find is people become very un-Christian. I mean, they become very unusual in their behavior. Many of these ex-witnesses, I mean, I can't believe how many times I see the F-bomb being dropped on Reddit. I can't believe all of the homosexual people that are looking for partners on Reddit. I can't believe of all of the twisted ways of thinking concerning atheism and, just running the other way from God, and actually even appears to even be devil worshippers in there to some degree. But I just can't believe how people can leave something that had a godly theme. The Watchtower had a godly connection, and then they just even become so rebelliously different. You notice that, Anne-Marie?
Well, I don't know if it's rebelliously different. I see it personally. This is only my opinion and my experience. I was held back so hard, held like a spring tightly in the iron fist of Watchtower, not allowed to think for myself, not allowed to question, not allowed to go to school. I wanted an education. I wasn't allowed to have my friends. I wasn't allowed to drink or party or do anything. In other words, I was not allowed the right to make my own choices, good or bad, whether or not anybody else agrees with my choices or understands. And when I got out and I realized for the first time in my entire life, it hit me. I was standing in the middle of the living room wearing something I would never wear before, and I was going to go somewhere to see somebody. And I realized for the first time in my entire life, I had made a decision what I was going to wear, what I was going to do, where I was going to go. And I didn't have to worry about Sister Bookbag or Sister Elderette or getting called in front of the elders or gossip. And I realized for the first time in my life that I could make my own choices. I could do my own thinking. And it wasn't about who thought what. I was sick to death of worrying about what everybody thought. So maybe you might describe me as rebellious or whatever, but I did what I wanted, when I wanted, and I had a great time. I did, because I needed for the first time in my life to be allowed to explore life. And I'm glad I did. I don't regret one thing, not one.
Oh no, I'm not gonna pick on you. In fact, I don't look at you as a rebellious person. I look at you as a kind-hearted person. But what you just said there, when you left it, you said, "That's it. I'm going for the gusto." It's just like you're letting a cat that's been cooped up in the house for 5 years, never went out, and all of a sudden the door opens. Who let the cat out? And he just runs like crazy. He probably doesn't even come home for 2 or 3 days. So maybe that was like you, Anne-Marie, right?
Yeah, but I think that the first thing, my brother, is I'm just an example of myself. I am not speaking for anybody else, but just for me to be finally in a position where I didn't have to worry about what anybody thought or gossip or anything. I never had the chance to have my own thoughts and my own choices ever. And I had to explore that. I needed to do that for my mental and emotional health. I had to recover. It's like a spring. You hold a spring real tight, and then when you finally let it go, where does it go? Who knows? All springs held tightly in an iron fist, when they're finally released, you don't know where they're going to go. They might go straight up. They might go sideways. They might go to the left. Who knows? Everybody's different. And one spring can't judge another spring because we're all different. We're all different. And there are a lot of people just like you. God bless your precious heart, Rick. I mean, that's great. You're in your Christian faith, and that's wonderful. But I think the basic part of being human is that we have our own brain. We don't all react the same way to the same treatment. And I was treated pretty freaking bad, really bad. And you know what? I needed to be free from all of it. I needed to be free from the control and the dirty looks and the things said behind my back. So yeah, I went off sideways and I did everything I wanted and anything I wanted. I mean, I wasn't crazy. I was, nice or whatever, but if it felt right, if I needed it at the time, and I didn't worry. It was all about, this is how I honestly feel. And I can't be the only one. And even if I am the only one, oh well.
You're not the only one.
Go ahead.
I knew and even if a teen or a woman of 23 has good habits, the congregation was constantly tearing you down if you had a blouse that was modest, but in a later modern this year's style. They would find something to nitpick. I knew a French sister who was pretty economically advantaged. She had a lot more than I did, and she'd go to a discount place where they had designer things on sale. She would have hats and dress beautifully, and they gave her hell for looking extra good. And she was a married woman. The men can't understand some of the things that the sisters went through when they didn't have a drug issue or a drinking issue. Just showing up, they want us to look proper, and some of us got hell for that. Then recently, here in the American South, everyone says, well, God bless you. We've been saying that for 400 years. We had a traveling overseer say, don't say God bless you to people when you meet them. It is to the point of ridiculous insanity. It does not build up. It is not encouragement. It is not what a Christian should do. It is not what a good citizen should do for another neighbor. Some of the stuff is crazy.
Well, I agree. Anne-Marie agrees with you too. In fact, thank you, Pixie, and for that thought. And that's something that I think is a little bit over the top when you say don't say God bless you to anybody. That's a typical witness thing.
From the podium.
Yeah. Oh no, that's sick. I wanted to read one comment here that Archie Kim from the USA. She talks about why people kind of leave the Watchtower, run the other way. She says, I think the whole purpose of the Watchtower Society is to create a spiritually damaged people so they'll reject Christ and will lose their dreams and be unfulfilled through their lives. Well, that's a good answer, Archie Kim. Thank you for bringing that up. So all kinds of thoughts on that. So, the Watchtower, just like Pixie just said, Anne-Marie, they'll bust your spirits. And if everybody in the South, and I know what she's saying because I live down in Florida, and more people down there said, God bless you, than they do up here in the North Country. But, even why would you're supposed to be a godly organization. What's the matter with saying God bless you? I guess because you're not a witness, it wouldn't work, right? You can't even say God bless you to another witness. These guys have got everything mixed up. They fell out of a spiritual tree and hit every branch on the way down. That's how I look at Anne-Marie.
No, I understand that. And, there always seem to be so many rules. And most of them, like social mores, unwritten rules of quote unquote Watchtower Christian behavior. But the rules seem to be different with other people. I mean, one elder might feel this way, one sister might feel that way, and it's, oh my God. I just couldn't deal with any of it. If I feel like saying Merry Christmas or God bless you or, whatever, it was so nice to figure out who I was. And I figured out that I'm a nice, good person, and I don't need anybody's approval. And if anybody doesn't approve of me, you know what? It doesn't bother me. It doesn't, because I'm straight up honest, and I care about other people's feelings and opinions, and I support them and their right for their beliefs and their opinions. And it's just, we weren't ever allowed. We were so stringently controlled, and it seemed like controlled by everyone. Right? That's just how I experienced Watchtower. Anybody want to say anything, so I'll shut my mouth?
Well, let me ask if this person who was going to come on today is with us. What we do on this program is we attempt to get people to tell their story of being in the Watchtower. So it can be 5 minutes, it can be 20 minutes, it can be a half hour. We'll give you the time if you'd like to tell us how you were connected with the Watchtower organization and how you felt about it when you were in there. Is there anybody out there that would like to do this on the program right now? Maybe you're listening into YouTube or Facebook and you see the number on the screen. Go ahead and dial that number. Say, hey, Rick and Anne Marie, I'll give it a shot. I'll tell my story. We've actually, I went back and kind of counted, Anne Marie, how many stories that we have told on this program. You have any idea?
Well, good gracious. How many have come out of the Watchtower and been on 6 screens?
Well, I mean, just on this particular program, though, this program right here, people sharing their story. How many people you think have come through here since we've been doing the program?
You think how many? I'm sorry?
Yeah. How many you think came through since you've been doing this program? How many people do you think you've interviewed and talked to that came through and told their story?
Maybe 90, 80, I don't know.
Oh, well, it's up there. It's over 50. It's over 50, 56 or something like that in that area. I mean, that's a lot of people that came on and told their stories. Some of them were very sad, Emery. Some of the people coming on here, they actually made you cry. Many stories that made you cry. Yes, in fact, it was very sad what some of the people had to say. But yeah, so I think it's been a good program. This particular program right here, it gets a lot of attention on YouTube, and even when we go live with it, even on Facebook. So it's working. So is there anyone out there who would like to tell this story? You must have a story. I'll tell you, it doesn't have to be the most extreme story. Maybe you enjoyed being a Jehovah's Witness. I have talked to people that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that kind of liked, that they miss being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine it. But in fact, one person, I think I mentioned this to you before, she says, well, I liked being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I said, you did? She said, yeah. I said, what you like about it? She says, well, I like the regimented lifestyle. I like direction in my life. And that's one thing the Watchtower will do to you. They'll give you plenty of direction. I'll tell you that. They'll give you direction you're not even looking for. Go ahead. You're on with us.
Hey, Rick.
Yes. Hello, Larry.
Hi. I just want to welcome my friend Deirdre. I think she's watching right now. And I'll just tell my story briefly. I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness. Most of you guys or regulars know me. So I was born and raised, and my experience was a little bit different. I wasn't a rebellious person, yet I was pretty much able to do what I wanted. My father, even though he was an elder, he was a little bit different. He wasn't the typical Jehovah's Witness. I guess he thought because he was an elder, he can do things that other people weren't supposed to do. But I played with friends outside the organization, and I did things, and I didn't get in trouble for it. And I know a lot of people who got their hands spanked. They got sent to the back room. I didn't have any real trouble until I got older. And then, long story short, I believe I was sexually abused as a child, as a baby, and it affected me. And so I had trouble with the congregation. I made the mistake of confessing, and it's you get in a lot of trouble by confessing. But I really thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was in a true religion, And so each time I confessed, I got in more and more trouble. And then eventually, I thought I had my life straightened out, and I was a pioneer, and I became a ministerial servant. And then I was going out in service with this elder's wife, and she asked me what my goals were, and I said I'd like to find a sister and get married and have a family. And at that time I was on disability, and I didn't have a place to stay. Really, I was living out of my truck. I had my truck instead of a nice car to go out and service. And she basically told me that I had nothing to offer a sister. And so that hit me real hard, coming from an elder's wife. And so I ended up looking for women outside of the organization, because they didn't have a problem if I didn't have a home, if I didn't have a nice car. There's women that were even willing to support me, even though that's not what I wanted. But I wanted to find true love. And according to this sister, I had nothing to provide a sister, or nothing to offer. So, long story short, I'm sorry to make it so long, but I got in trouble again. And instead of confessing this time, I just became inactive for about 13 years. And then so during that time, elders kept visiting me, trying to get me come back. And so finally I came back, and I got up the nerve to confess. And the very day that I confessed, they kicked me out, and kicked me out for more than 3.5 years. I went through the process of trying to get back. I didn't miss a single meeting, and went back continuously for 3.5 years. And during that time, I started watching the 6 screens, and someone on there told me that the Watchtower teaches that Jesus Christ is not our mediator. And of course, I was still under their thumb, even at that time. I think it was 2 years into my disfellowshipping, and I said, "Oh no, they wouldn't teach that." And I said, "Show me." And then finally, they gave me where it was in 1979 Watchtower, April 1st, of all things, April 1st. We were all fools. So April 1st, Watchtower, 1979, page 31, and questions for readers. It said, in the strict biblical sense, Jesus Christ is the mediator only for anointed Christians. And when I read that in print, I was done. I was done with the Watchtower. So that's basically my story. But in the process, I lost the family. They didn't want to talk to me. So I basically lost all my friends and family. So that's it.
Well, that's an interesting story. And I tell you what, Larry, a lot of people never heard that story. And of course, times you have gone into a lot of detail about it, but really your connection with the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's just hard for you to have anything good to say about them. I mean, geez,
Yeah, not anymore. I used to be like Kurt. Remember Kurt? He used to always defend, and he's in another mental state now. He understands the Watchtower is not true religion. But those of us who were born and raised in it, when we thought and we were taught that it was the only true religion, we really accepted everything they said. And now, every religion has something good, something right. That's what attracts people. And the Watchtower does have a few things right, but they have so many things wrong. And for them to put other religions down because they don't teach truth, they're such hypocrites to put other religions down, because all religions have something good and something that isn't right.
well, Anne Marie, what do you think? Do you think the Watchtower has anything good?
Well, I don't know. I used to think that they were the whole association of brothers, that they were the true religion, like John said. But I never thought there was anything wrong with the Watchtower. I thought any problems that I had was because I wasn't spiritual enough. I wasn't mature enough, because that's what they told me. But everybody, sees it from their own experience. And I totally get where Larry John Wayne is coming from.
Yeah, Larry, in
I'm just
fact,
glad.
yeah, in fact, I have to mention to him, he did say, Anne Marie, he said that he came back after 13 years and wanted to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses again. And of course, when he confessed to them, they immediately disfellowshipped him and kicked him out. Now, Larry, that's changed. You know the new changes in the Watchtower now, right?
Yeah. I know a little bit about it, but the thing is, from the beginning, they don't follow their own teachings, because in the Watchtower, in their publications, they said that if a disfellowship person is out, the elders would go lovingly visit them. I've been out now since 2008. So that's about 17 years? So I've been out so long, and not a one elder came to visit me for the purpose of encouraging me to come back. There was one time when an elder came by, a new elder that didn't know me. They were going door to door, and I did talk to him, but it wasn't a planned thing. It was just because they were going door to door. And by the way, he said, "Oh, we'll come with the elders and we'll come meet with you." Even though he said that, they never showed up. So they don't do what they say they are supposed to do. They just want to look down on people and make restrictions and criticize. And I tell you, I'm so glad I'm out of that organization.
Well, and I'll tell you what, though, Larry. What the changes within the last year. Within the last year, they made some changes on that. They're really not going to. Well, they're going to. They don't call it disfellowshipping anymore. They call it removed. They're going to say you're removed from the congregation. They don't call it disfellowship. Now, the other thing about that, if a person, generally speaking, like you had that one judicial meeting and boom, you're out of there, done, finished. And that's how it was in the past. It was the same thing with me. I had that one meeting and I'm out of here. But I wanted to be out of there anyways. But anyways, well, what I'm saying here is they've changed. Usually they would have one meeting and you're done. You confess a sin, you were drunkard, or you were illegally doing something wrong or committing immorality or something. You'd be gone the first day. But now what they're doing is they're not going to remove you on the first judicial committee hearing. They're going to wait and see what happens. They'll have another one. They'll meet maybe a month or two later, a couple months later. And if they see you following the right course, they'll meet with you again and again until they really see that, you straighten your life out, but they're not going to be that eager to remove. But now what I was thinking when you were just talking, you were trying to come in, and even I know there's another man that listens in here, my friend Dick Borgie. He wanted to go back in like you did. And they said, "Okay, Dick, we have to come to all the meetings," which he did. You got to follow the directions of the elders. And the poor guy, geez, he'd go into the Kingdom Hall and no one would talk to him. He'd have to sit up the back. Even his own wife and his two kids, they would sit, not even with him at the Kingdom Hall. And that's very humiliating. That's punishment of the highest order. But to make a long story short, what you can do, if you were disfellowshipped, even you right now, but I know you don't want to go back. But if you went to the congregation and said, "Look at brothers, I am repentant. I don't want to leave you folks. I want to come back into the fold." They will instantly bring you back in. All you have to say is you're repentant and you're going to do better. And they brought in within the last year, in fact, even less than a year, they have brought in 63,000 new, well, I shouldn't say new, but I should say renewed witnesses. Ones that were disfellowship, they brought back. Yeah, they did.
I think in New York City, that's called a masochistic scene.
Yeah, it would
People
be.
pay money for that. I would like to thank the Watchtower for not letting me do the microphones and the sound system, because I went and made all my audio dreams come true since they didn't let me. And I would like to encourage everyone who was taught the electric slide at every Watchtower Jehovah's Witness wedding to do that wonderful dance right outside the door of the Kingdom Hall. Just just electric slide your way right out.
Pixie, you made a statement there, masochistic. It does sound masochistic. It's like self-punishment going back into the witness world. Boy, I'll tell you, I never thought of that, but you're punishing yourself,
Well, it is, because it doesn't offer any forgiveness. It's Sunday, so we can say that when we read the Bible, Jesus offers a forgiveness, grace message, and they just want you to go back for more punishment. And again, they're from New York City, so they understand the weird dynamic of that.
Yeah, good comment. Well, Anne-Marie, and now Anne-Marie's sitting patiently. I've kind of taken her program over. I didn't mean to do that to poor Anne-Marie. I don't want her to be mad at me. You still with me, Anne-Marie?
Rick, shut up. I would never be mad at you. You keep everything going, you and Pixie and everybody that calls in. As far as the numbers, you said that they brought in about 63,000 who were disfellowshipped. They brought them back into the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know about you, but, sometimes people in prison who have been in prison for most of their lives, when they get out, they think that their dream is to get out, to be free. But a lot of them, when they do get out of prison, they don't know what to do. And they miss that regiment. They've been acclimated so much to prison life that they'll go back. They'll do whatever they have to do to go back, which is usually commit a crime. And they will literally go back to enslavement. And to me, Watchtower is enslavement. But they make it so pretty. It's all hearts and flowers when you're on the outside. You want to go back because you feel like you're going to feel like, oh, I'm accepted. I'm back. I'm one of them. Oh, I'm so glad that I'm not in the world anymore. Oh, please. But I just wanted to say, it seems that the bottom line, Watchtower is so desperate for their numbers, because they've been losing so many thousands, have just walked out. They have been so desperate for numbers that a while back, I'm sure you recall, Rick, they were doing quote unquote prison witnessing for years. And I thought, okay, so they're recruiting murderers and rapists and God knows who else. But then I found out that there was a special area of the prison where the sex offenders were, and they were recruiting them. So how desperate do you have to be for numbers? Oh, we'll just teach you, how it is to be a Jehovah's Witness, and we'll clean you up and get you a suit, cut your hair, give a book bag to you for you to hold, and you'll look good and play the part. And you're one of us. Congratulations. And now they're not doing that. Maybe where else can we look for numbers, folks? They're sitting at that conference table on Wednesday morning at Bethel. Well, where can we get more witnesses? They're not coming in through the witnessing work. Oh, I know. We'll offer forgiveness. We'll offer with open arms anybody who wants to come back. All they have to do is say they're sorry. Oh, whoopee, we get 63,000 back. Yeah, see, our numbers are growing by leaps and bounds, right, Rick?
Well, that's what they do. That's what they do, Anne-Marie. They play all kinds of games. I read something. Now, this happened a couple of years ago, but I just ran across it yesterday going over the news. I didn't realize it, but, Jehovah's Witnesses, they always pander to people. There's many Jehovah's Witnesses that have lost loved ones in the Holocaust, for example. And I can remember about 25 years ago in the Kingdom Hall, they made an announcement. If any Jehovah's Witness had relatives that died in the Holocaust or were there and lived, by all means, get a hold of the Watchtower. So I asked one of the elders about it. He didn't want to give me too much information, but I did a little digging. And what they were doing is they were getting, if you had a relative and you were a Jehovah's Witness and you had a relative that was in the Holocaust, that they would help you get money from the government. The government was giving money to relatives who suffered the loss of their parents or whatever because of the Holocaust. Now, that's pandering. That they were helping them get the money. And so what do you think the Watchtower would do when the people, got a settlement of, say, $10,000? Well, gee, Watchtower helped us get it. We got to give them a couple of grand. And then I ran across something yesterday. Evidently, they've done the same thing with the Civil War. Now the Watchtower, well, it's not recently. It's probably a year or two old now, but I ran across it. They're looking for witnesses who had relatives that their lives were affected because of the Civil War. I mean, we're talking ancient history here. And they're trying to dig this up because they're going to give I guess the government's going to give some people who were affected because of the Civil War money. So the Watchtower is encouraging the witnesses that were connected with families that were in the war or lost family members or whatever to contact them and to help them get money. They're going to want something in return. So that's pandering any way they can to get people to get closer to Jehovah, Anne-Marie. It's unreal.
Remember, Jehovah equals the Watchtower organization.
Oh, yeah.
It is disgusting how they dangle bait in front of somebody. Well, we have to have different bait for different types of people. All they care about is numbers. Numbers equate money, free labor, and just be able to say, we're growing by leaps and bounds. But when they know they've got you, when they know that they can use the emotional blackmail on you, that you will lose your friends and family, they want you to get really established in the Watchtower organization. All your friends are Watchtowerites. All of your, a lot of people work for Jehovah's Witnesses, like you hired Jehovah's Witnesses for your company. There have been many Jehovah's Witnesses who had or have a company, and they're always encouraged by Watchtower to hire Jehovah's Witnesses. So you'll lose everything because they want your entire life to be based on and connected to Watchtower so that they have more to hold over you. And if you go crawling back to this cult, why? Because they look so good and they're so loving and, oh, wow, gee, I missed that. You go back, at some point, you're going to be kicking your own butt.
I'll tell you, Emery, you never want to get into a business agreement with Jehovah's Witnesses. You never want to do that. We have a man that comes on this program. I won't tell you his name. I think you all know it. He's told the story numerous times. His brother-in-law, he wanted to borrow $40,000 to start a business. The brother borrowed the $40,000, and he went out, and rather than really get a business going, took his whole family to Disney World, bought a new house, and left his poor brother hanging and never paid him back the 40 grand. There's stories about bad business dealings in the Watchtower. I've seen it myself. It can be very difficult to deal. In fact, I'll just briefly say, I'm going back. I'm going to roll the clocks back a good 30, 35 years ago. And I had an opportunity to buy a building right here where I live in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. And the building was a beautiful building, and I needed it for my business. But the only thing, it was a little big and a little too expensive at the time. So I talked to the man who owned the business, and he said that he would sell me the building. It was on the market for $200,000. That's back then. It's worth over $1 million today. But he said he would have sold me he'll sell me the building for $180,000. And if I could put $20,000 down, we could go through with the deal. So I was able to come up with $5,000, and I talked to some of the elders got snooping around, and, oh, Rick, you got a building there? I'll get involved with you. So I had 3 other elders. These are elders that wanted to get involved with me. So they said they'd all put up $5,000, and I put my $5,000 up to hold it, and they all committed themselves to going in business and getting the building together. They all quit. They all said, no, my wife talked me out of it. They left me hanging. So I gave the guy $5,000 as a down payment. Fortunately, he gave it back to me, but he wasn't under legal contract. He wasn't even under contract to do that. He could have kept it. But fortunately, those guys nearly hurt me a lot financially. So, they were all on their word. But, man, I'll tell you, I would never encourage anyone to get in business with another witness. Never, ever, ever. Terrible.
Oh, man. Well, at least that guy gave you back his money. God bless him. But just along those lines, I have heard more stories of Jehovah's Witnesses that, borrowed money and didn't pay it back. There was this one sister, the biggest gossip in our entire circuit, and she had a lot of gossip about me, too. And this woman called me, a single young mother with all these kids, barely making it financially. And she called me and she said, Anne-Marie, I need help. Please, can you help me? My son emptied my bank account. I only had $150. That was my bill money. I am desperate. I'm going to have all these bounce checks. It was way back in the 70s. And she said, please, can you lend me $150? Like, well, I didn't have $150, but I felt so bad for this poor woman. So I called my brother, and he was working full time, supporting him and our older brother. And I told him about this poor sister who was desperate. And I said, please, could you, lend me this money? And he did. And he said, I really need this back, Anne Marie. I don't have money to just give away. And I said, yes, I will pay you back, because his sister had promised to pay me back. Well, I gave her the money. She never paid me back. And $150 might not sound like a lot, but back in 77, that was a lot of money for a poor woman with children to have to come up with. And I couldn't afford to pay my poor brother back. And she never said another word about that money. She never said a word. Just took it.
Yeah. Well, we had a man, Anne-Marie, you knew him really well, Dan Hall. And many people listening to this program today, they knew him. He had a program here on the 6 screen. He filled in many times for people. And he really got so sick, destroyed his stomach, ruined his health, of being deeply involved in business with Jehovah's Witness men, particularly. And people probably know him. He spoke about it on the air. He had a company called Trimline, and it was a car striping business. And what happens in the world of business, if you're a businessman, a good one, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses will flock around you thinking they can make a quick buck. So he was selling franchises. And Dan sold franchises under the Trimline name that these guys would go out and put striping on cars at dealerships. It was big back in the 1970s and early 80s. In fact, I was in that business myself for a while. But Dan put a lot of witnesses in business. Many of them became very financially successful, but he landed up as a poor man. Lost his wife, lost his house, he lost everything. And the reason was, and he would tell you if he was still alive, he lost everything because of the character and the way the witnesses treated him in business. Terrible story, Anne-Marie. You know the story well, I'm sure.
I do know the story well. And what he told me is that he not only got them started in their franchise of Trimline, but he taught them the business. He taught them the ins and outs. He was a brilliant businessman. But what happened is when it came tax time, he got hit with the taxes not only of his own business, but of all of the franchises that he had given, or I think he gave them. I don't think he even really sold. If he did, it was very, very minimal amount, because he was trying to help the brothers. Well, it turned out that these brothers that he had set up in their franchise kept his Social Security number on the business papers. So the IRS came after him for all of the taxes owed by all of these other franchises that rightfully were not his to pay, but legally. And he said, just like the Bible says in Matthew, if you have something against your brother, go lay bare his fault between you and him alone. He went to every one of those brothers that he had set up in business, said, brother, please, I have to pay my taxes, but I can't pay yours too. Please put it, help me. Straighten it out, put it in your name, in under your Social Security number. And he said, every one of them said to him, not my problem. So in desperation, he went to the elders. And this man was a presiding overseer at the time. And here, poor Dan Hall went to the elders. Please help me. I can't pay all this. And they disfellowshipped him for being greedy and arrogant. Disfellowshipped him. And that's why he lost his marriage, his wife, his property, the house he had built for his wife, Jackie, on this property that he had bought. He ended up living in a little travel trailer in a field, dying. And he did die finally from this horrible thing that he had in his body. And it was horrible. My husband and I went to see him not long before he died. He was just He was a broken man. And if Watchtower truly was God's organization, if it truly was, the worldwide association of brothers, why would these brothers, all of them, not just one, I forgot how many he had set up in the business, and they all kept his Social Security number on the business papers. So he got hit with it, and the elders disfellowshipped him when he went to them for help to please go talk to these guys. Oh, you're just arrogant. You're just greedy. You're causing divisions. I forgot, like 2, 3 or whatever things they said. And poor Dan, he was such a good-hearted, humble man. Thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to bring it up.
Well, good. That's a story I always remember. And Dan Hall and I, we talked even, we both had similar businesses. And, Dan was a sharp guy. He was a very good businessman. I used to think of that myself. I had this company. We were very similar, but Trimline was way bigger than what I was doing. We were up here in New England, and we did the same thing. But he was around the world. He had brothers working for him all over the world. And it was just a sad state of affairs. Well, that was, I'll tell you the way, Marie, I'm glad you kind of brought up the idea of don't get in business with a witness. You don't want to do that. It was so annoying to me. I had this other elder. I had an elder. I had a shop here on the main street where I live, and I had a used car license. I didn't want to be a used car dealer, but I had a license, so I would buy some cars and sell them. And so one of the elders, he was sniffing around. He says, "Oh, Rick, this is wonderful to sell cars like this." He says, and I would buy them at the auction. I had connection with the auto auction up here in Boston. So I would, he says, "Rick, can I go to the auction with you and buy some cars and I can sell them on your lot?" I said, "Yeah, I'll charge you. I'm going to charge you, I think it was $40 to put it on my lot because I had to pay rent there." So he said, "Okay, I'll do that." But I can remember, I took him to the auction. He bought cars and put them out there, but he wasn't, he didn't buy the right cars or something. So he was losing money, but he more or less kind of blamed me in many respects for getting him into the business. He wanted to do it. You don't want to look at, I had at one point 30 people working. 15 of them were Jehovah's Witnesses. The other 15 were just regular people that weren't witnesses. And I'll tell you what, it was so much easier dealing with the non-witness. When it came time to go to the conventions in the summer, it was brutal. They all wanted to, "Oh, no, Rick, we're all going to this convention. You'll have to go somewhere else." So I live in Boston. I had to go down to Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia because they all wanted to go the one up in Portland, Maine, or out here in Massachusetts. So very uncooperative. So my advice to you, if you're even a witness, don't hire another witness. You want your business to prosper and do good. Not marry, but employ someone that is a non-witness. You'll do a lot better. Well, Anne Marie, I'll tell you. There's so much. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate what you just said. It's a shame that a lot of witnesses, I don't know why, but I guess they're so used to being fake that to them fake seems genuine. But when it comes to hiring somebody who's a Jehovah's Witness, if you work for a Jehovah's Witness, I don't know why, but they expect you to just give them a free ride. They expect you to accommodate them, and you can't count on them. And if you say anything, you're the bad guy. You're causing divisions. You're not being loving. You know that one?
Oh, I absolutely know.
Boundary issues. They don't have any boundaries. And I've got a couple more items here that were not thrift store items that were the better clothes. They've disappeared again, too. These people have a kind of socialism mindset where they think if you have $1, that 50 cents of it belongs to them.
Pixie, you're absolutely right. Look at my parents. My parents had a motel up in New Hampshire, and my mother was a loyal Jehovah's Witness. My father never became a witness, but they had this motel. And who do you think would always want to go up to the motel in the summertime? The witnesses. And my mother, even being the loyal witness as it was kind of irritating her. You have them come and you got to give them a discount. I mean, you can't, you can't charge them full price. You got to do something for them. So I believe it was actually driving my mother nuts because it all show up and they were all like a room. And you put yourself in the shoes of my mother. And I remember my mother, she's not with us now, but I can remember her always saying, the witnesses always want to know my business. They always want to know my business. And they do.
Even that, sure.
Yeah. They always want to, they butt into what you're doing. Even when I had my business going, it was really fairly successful. And I was just a young guy. I was only in my 20s, late 20s, and I had things going pretty good. And one of the people who was a witness guy came to work with me. He wasn't a real loyal witness, but he says, Rick, you should hear what they're saying about you. You don't hear it, Rick. They're saying you're very materialistic and you love money. I never was, I never was materialistic, honest to goodness. But that's the type of rumors they would start. See,
I've seen it with my own eyes.
yeah, Larry, what do you have to say?
Yeah, it's kind of related, but it's not having to do with business. I was in a congregation in Ventura, California, and I had just got injured, and so I was on disability. I was living out of my truck, and I was going to this congregation, and there was this guy that was studying, and I'll just say he was a black guy, and it doesn't make any difference to me, but I guess it does to some people, and you'll understand in the process of my story. But so he was living under the bridges. He was a homeless guy. He started studying, and then this black couple, older couple, they had their own house, just two of them living in a house. They approached me because obviously nobody was helping this guy, this black guy that was sleeping underneath the bridges. They came to me. They knew I was homeless. They knew I was living in my truck. They asked me if I could provide him a place to stay. So I did, and so it was the two of us in my truck. I had a little small camper shell. But can you imagine, the whole congregation didn't even offer, and this couple came to me for me to give this guy a place to stay in my truck, and they had their own home, and they didn't even offer him.
I believe that story 100%, Larry. I believe it 100%. It's knucklehead reasoning. But it actually sounds humorous. It actually almost sounds like a joke. Here you were willing to help him, and that must have been awkward too, having him live in a truck with you. Jeez.
Yeah, he wasn't quite normal, and just because some people aren't normal, and so it didn't work out. So soon after he started staying with me, I said it's not working out. So it's hard for two people to stay in a truck, especially if one person isn't observing boundaries, and because it was my truck, and so. But I have another related story. Soon after that, well, in connection with that story, I was living homeless, and I had all the time in the world. So I thought, well, I have all the time, I might as well pioneer. So I applied to pioneer, and they said, no, we're not going to let you pioneer because you're homeless. So I couldn't pioneer because I was homeless. So I moved to Virginia. I had a travel trailer there on my property. So basically I was living in a travel trailer. It's a step up. It's almost living homeless, but it's a camper shell. A camper trailer. And so I applied to pioneer when I went to the Virginia. And so they allowed me to pioneer there. So I pioneered there for a while, and then I came back to the same congregation that wouldn't let me pioneer. And I was already a pioneer, so they couldn't stop me. And so eventually I moved to Camarillo, and I was still a pioneer. And I was still living out of my truck. And then this very nice couple, elderly couple, who needed help. So here I was a pioneer, and they asked for my help. He had emphysema, and he was in a wheelchair. So I helped him get ready and go to the meetings, and if he needed to be lifted into the chair, or if whatever he needed, I helped him. So they gave me a room to stay in their house to help him out. Well, after a few months, he died. So the elders approached me and told me I couldn't live there anymore. Because, by the way, they were elderly. I think I was in my 20s at that time, and they were in their 80s. And they came to me and said that I had to move out because it wasn't appropriate. Here I am, a single brother, and now this elderly sister, she's a single sister.
That's, oh my goodness, that's nuts. You know,
it is.
That's a good story, because, you know, Larry, that's how stupid the witness world is. Gee, that would have been good for you. There's a place to live. You can kind of take care of her too. And at the same, but they're coming down thinking there's going to be some, you know, bad relationship going on here.
I shudder to think all the strange things I've heard in that organization.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It really, really is. It's a crazy thing.
And then when I moved out of there, eventually, I got married, and then I got divorced. And then, so I was basically divorced after I got disfellowshipped. And so when I was asking to be reinstated, they asked me, am I staying in the same house as my ex-wife? I said, yes. Are you using the same bathroom? So it's like they ask all these stupid questions as if it matters. Am I under the same roof? Well, that used to be, I don't know if it still is, it used to be a big thing. Are you living under the same roof? Even if you're in a different bedroom, are you living under the same roof? Well, wait a minute. When you go to assemblies, aren't the hotels all one roof? And so you have all these brothers and sisters living under the same roof?
Well, you know, along those lines, Larry, it just sounds so wacky, and I'm sure people even laughing out there. But, you know, when I moved back from Florida, I moved back here to Massachusetts, and I was waiting for the house to get ready. So I stayed with a witness family. And so we stayed there. They had a big house, and we kind of kept our, you know, everything nice and clean and stayed out of their way. But anyways, my two daughters, they wanted to, you know, pioneer and, you know, be witnesses right here because they were in Florida. So they want to go out and service. So in the house, there was a young boy. His name was Jimmy. There was no attraction to Jimmy. We knew Jimmy when he was a little baby. He grew up with with my daughters. So it came time. I only had one car. I was waiting to go back to Florida to pick up my other car. So I drove because I had to do some work up here. So I was going to go off to work that morning, and I was going to have Jimmy take my daughters with him to the Kingdom Hall to pioneer. And so the witness mother, oh no, Rick, we can't let Jimmy and your daughters be in the same car together. Now here it was a snowy day, and I said, sister, they're not, you know, we know Jimmy. There's nothing promiscuous here. They're just friends. Oh no, we can't do it with Jehovah's Witnesses. So I had to take my two daughters on a snowy day and follow Jimmy down to the Kingdom Hall to drop the girls off. Now, that's a type of reasoning in the witness world. They think that, you know, everyone is going to get in some type of a relationship with someone, a sexual relationship, just because we're in the same car with each other. That this is extreme thinking, Larry. It's nuts, you know?
Yeah. Besides that, how hypocritical, a lot of the elders that were enforcing these rules, we found out later, were having affairs with other married sisters too. So it's the whole religion, the whole concept of the Watchtower is so hypocritical.
We got it. Well, Larry, good to hear from you today. Really, always good to hear from you. You got a really good sounding voice too, by the way. You sound really good. You really do. You got a good voice, Larry. A really, really good voice. Very articulate and sounds good. Thank you for coming on today. Well, Anne Marie, what do you think?
I think Larry is just giving us a taste of what we all know to be true. Like I said before, there are all these unwritten rules in the Watchtower. But on top of that, there are so many individual Watchtowerites that have their own quote unquote rules that if we don't go by, oh, we've done something against Jehovah, like practically a brother, you know, if somebody grows up with your kids, it's like their brother, their cousin, and it's a snowy day. That's so stupid. They make stupid look smart with their stupidity.
Absolutely. Well, we got about 10 more minutes. So if anyone would like to speak up, say hello to Anne Marie, myself.
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Here, y'all.
Go ahead.
And about these experiences, I've had this where this one incident, it was a time when an older sister in the congregation and her husband, he was called on and would visit him, and after he was dead, would be over there doing and mow our yard. But of course, his boat, we got it, and one in the congregation doing our electrical in one of our outbuildings, he was supposed to give us a ride in this boat after we restored it. We did the work, and he got the boat and never kept the promise, and we never got our chance to ride in it. And that was the deal. And that happened with my father, and we were supposed
You still there with us? You still with us, Dallas?
I am.
Okay.
So, I mean, you didn't approach him. I guess you didn't want to rock the boat, huh?
You know what? Even the brothers always told us you have to have everything in writing, and that's probably, if it's not in writing, they take advantage of it.
I do agree on that.
Well, there you go. Anybody else have a little experience or a comment to share? We don't have much time. Hit star 6. Share your thoughts.
Yeah, Anne Marie, just a couple quickies.
Hi, Dick.
One of hi, Anne Marie, and everybody else. I used to repair TVs. I was a TV repairman, and I used to do electronics, TVs, radios, 8-tracks, that type of thing back in the day. And I'd always come home from work, and there'd be a radio or something on my porch with a little note. Can you try to find out what's wrong with it? And I fixed so many TVs for people. One of the ones I got a big kick out of, I got a note on a radio saying, "Can you please find out what's wrong with my radio? It used to work, now it doesn't." So I opened it up and I put a new battery in it. It worked fine. Just drop it off at Dick Forgey's house. And another thing that I always get a kick out of, I used to have 2 cars, and I had a big Chevy Suburban. And some of the sisters were had an argument on who was going to go with me and my family in the Chevy Suburban. And I wanted to go in my new Trans Am, to an assembly. But they were arguing, well, you were with the Boogies last time, so can we go now? Or can I go now? I just thought that was kind of funny. If you have anything, boy, I tell you what, the witnesses know about it, and I couldn't tell you how much money I've loaned out. 20 here, 100 here, never got it back. Never got it back. And Rick was right. I was the one with the $40,000 on my brother-in-law. I was supposed to start a business. We bought a house, and then it was, you pay your second mortgage because you have money anyway. So what difference does it make? That's the way they look at things. Thank you, Anne Marie.
Well, thank you, Dick. It's amazing the evil that they get away with, the wrong that they get away with. And if you say anything, the one who's been wronged, you're the problem. Wow. Talk about true Christian love.
Hey, Anne Marie, I do want to say, if Dietrich's still listening, there's something to be said about people in general. People are people. So whether they're in the Watchtower or not, there are the same kind of people in the religion and or in other religions. But the main thing is there's an atmosphere of being users. Like the Watchtower gets free labor, and so it's kind of a mentality that is passed down. So they figure, well, we give free labor to the Watchtower, so we should get a benefit somewhere else. So I think that's maybe some part of it. Human nature is, well, I'm giving so much to the Watchtower, maybe my brother can give something to me. And just to let everybody know, it's not just because of the Watchtower. People are people, and there are users, there's abusers, and there's people who are dishonest in any religion, or even not in the religion.
I appreciate your thoughts. I think that I think it's important to concentrate on the fact that, yeah, there are users and abusers and scammers and liars and thieves all over the place. But the thing is, this is supposed to be Jehovah's organization.
Yeah.
The true brotherhood, where they follow the Bible, where they're all about love and kindness. So I personally feel that we need to point out, not that there are others and everybody's out there and there are those out there too that are these things, but when you have an organization, this is the only organization I know of that loudly proclaims they represent the true God. They alone are true Christians. And when you find out the rapes, the pedophiles, the child molestation, the using and abusing of other brothers, the lying, all of the things that they do, that it's so rampant in the Watchtower organization that loudly proclaims that they're so clean. How many times have we heard, we need to keep Jehovah's organization clean? Clean? When has it ever been clean? It's just like Jesus said, you look good on the outside like whitewashed graves, but inside you're full of dead man's bones. You clean the outside cup, but inside is full of ugliness. The very people who claim so loudly to really represent God, the only ones who really live by the Bible, I call bullshit.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Marie, for making that aspect so clear. And I just wanted, in case my friend was listening, I just want her to know the reason why we're saying this is not that we're picking on people necessarily, but like you said, they're supposed to and claim to be in the true organization and keeping God's name clean and upholding his name, and look what they're doing.
Exactly.
Hello, Anne Marie.
Yeah, we have very little time. Who's this, please?
This is Susan. Hi, honey.
Hi, Susan.
I just wanted to say real quickly, Rick has a saying that is proven true every time. He says, how they go in is how they go out. And they have a basic personality. And what their personality is going in is going to be when they leave, too. They don't change that much. So I have learned to listen to Rick saying, how they go in is how they go out.
Oh, no doubt. And it just seems that the Watchtower organization tends to exacerbate any flaws, any negative flaws, shortcomings. If they're kind of messed up emotionally, mentally, they tend to be liars or fake or thieves or the type that are manipulators or whatever. Boy, they find the promised land in the Watchtower because they get away with all of it. All you have to do is smile that theocratic smile and play the Watchtower part. And, oh, you're just so spiritual. But if you have a conscience and you bring up a certain thing that bothers you or you confess, you are gonna get in trouble. That is so sad. So, Rick, are we gonna wrap this up?
Well, I think I would like to have, I believe it's Dan Clark. I would love to have him come on and voice his thoughts. Dan, is that you? Yes, go ahead, Dan. I see you out there. Yep.
That's me, Rick. Yeah, I've been enjoying the show. Yeah, some really, really good points. Like you said, this organization presents themselves to be, just absolutely spot clean. And I just remembered a time where a new elder came into our hall, and I kind of wanted to get to know him. And when I got to know him, he invited himself over my house. He basically read me scriptures for 20 minutes, telling me that I was under obligation to lend him money. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? How much money? And I forget exactly how much of it. It was either $500 or $1,500, $500 or $1,500. And I was like, well, I kind of got upset. I said, well, what do you mean? This gives you obligation. And he started going through the scriptures, and he literally took me to the brothers, and we almost had a fist fight. But I wanted to say this too, along the line with what John Wayne and what you said, Rick, about when you go in, what Susan just said, when you go in, you come out the same way. And I got to bring this point out. I was an alcoholic in the Jehovah's Witnesses. After every meeting, we drank 2 quarts of beer, which is a lot of beer, 232 ounces. And when I got out, I got clean. I had a sister one time send me people that needed help. They were like, this person needed help. So we were like, oh, yeah. And so they were witnesses that needed help. And we were buying hotels, and we were buying this and buying that. And then one day I said, these people are drunk. And so I asked this lady in San Francisco, I said, are you drunk? And she's like, what's it to you? And I said, well, you're asking me for $150 for a hotel, and you're telling me you worked at this bit. But Rick, I got to say this along with John Wayne and all that. When you get out, like you said, you're not really transformed in there. You're actually, I was actually being prepared for what I was going to face outside when I was in there. Because I have a long list. I could read you stories and stories and stories of not only myself that got ripped off by brothers, but other brothers that got ripped off, fights that broke out in Kingdom Halls over plumbing and different things brothers were doing. But what I want to say is this. A lot of brothers get hounded when they get out for money from people who are alcoholics that were former Jehovah's Witnesses and are still alcoholics. And we don't have to serve that. I'm sorry. I believe, a friend in need's a friend indeed and all that crap. But we got to learn skills. One of the skills we have to learn as people is to say no. And I've had to say no, and people get pissed. And I'm like, hey, if you're drinking, you got a cell phone, you got cigarettes, then you're going to figure it out. You think I'm wrong there, guys? I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know how many people we bought. It might have been up to 15. It was like every day someone called us, Seattle, Washington, here. The sister's like, oh, they need help. They need help. They need help. I had people live with me twice that I had to throw out. And it's like, so I just want to say we can actually learn some skills by being screwed over. We get our voice. And I just wanted to say that, Rick, because, we don't have to, it's okay to tell somebody you're an alcoholic. It's okay to say, you might want to get some help at a 12 steps. You might want to go, and pretty much, Rick, anybody that's called me that's been on the show or whatever, and I've said that too, they've told me where to go. They, not that it's about your show or anything. I'm just saying when I've said, well, it sounds to me like there might be a little alcohol problem here. Man, they have told me to go to hell and back, and I'm like, whoa. So I agree, Rick, coming in, going out. If we're in there and we're an alcoholic, when we're coming out, we're an alcoholic. If we're in there and we're a liar, we come out, we're a liar. You know what I mean? Somehow the Kingdom Hall does not have that transformative effect that we need to be good people. What do you think?
I agree with you. I'm so glad. In fact, you mentioned something there, Dan, that really resonated with me. You learn the skills after a while of how to say no. When I was young in business, I mentioned earlier, I was only in my late 20s, and I had a bunch of people working for me. And, it was very hard. Most of them, well, actually half of them were Jehovah's Witnesses. 15 of those people were Jehovah's Witnesses. And they would come to me and the gas is going to be shut off. And Brother Ferrin, can you help us? And, they almost felt like I had to do it. Really. So, I helped so many of them. And then all of a sudden I had many of them even stealing from me. I'm saying, geez, you help people and they do this to you. So, as of late, Dan, I have another business going now, and I got people working for me. And boy, I'll tell you what, it's very tough today getting people to come in and go to work. It's even worse than it was years ago. Of course, I'm not hiring witness people, but boy, I'll tell you what, the climate has changed for workers. So an old man told me, and what Susan was even bringing up, how they come in is how they go out. Get rid of them if they're not working the first day. Yeah.
I had a guy one time, Rick, I'll just say this real quick. I know other people want to talk, but I had a brother one time, I was given some money down in Texas. And the elders told me, don't give him money. His wife called us and said he buys porn. And I'm like, okay. He said, if you want to do something, ask him to pay his electric bill. That guy cussed me up and down. I said, well, what do you need the money for? He says, well, my power or something. I said, okay, let me just write a check out to the power company. Now, this is a skill. It's a skill. I want to help them. Let me write out a check to the power company. Who the hell do you think you are? That's what he told me. Who the fuck, like this? And I'm like, I said, you said you needed help with a power bill. I'm writing a check to your power company. And he walked out of my house, told me to go every which way. I was buying another guy groceries. This is crazy. I was buying a brother groceries, and he pulls out $100 bill. And I'm like, dude, you got money. And he just looked at me. He was going to let me buy groceries. And it's what you guys have been talking about all along, this entitlement. It's like, you got to be joking. But in there, for whatever reason, Anne-Marie is bringing this up, for whatever reason, there's not the transformation in the kingdom hall. And it's what Borgie's saying. There's no Holy Spirit there. There's no wanting to do right there. It's just, I got to get to paradise. And that's not the motive for being in life and serving God, is to do God's will because it's the right thing to do and love your neighbor. It's not to get. And I think in the kingdom hall, it's about getting. It's about getting from point A to point B. It's not about loving. And that's the big problem. So anyway, I think that's why there's not the transformation in there, why people just stay the same. They're just only focused on one thing, that they'll get saved and won't get destroyed by Jehovah. Anyway, Rick, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for that comment. I really enjoyed that. I love to always hear Dan when you come in. I always say, Dan, the numbers go up. The numbers go up. Thank you.
I don't know.
Well, what I'm going to speak about now is, I wanted to tell you that, in fact, I'm going to do it on this program. I was going to do it on the next program, but we have a half hour left. And I just wanted to talk. Today is a very historic day for our little program here. We actually started, it was 20 years ago today, January 26th. And that we started exposing the Watchtower. And people have asked me all kinds of questions about the 6 screens. Well, where did it come from and how did it start and all of that. But I'll just briefly give you a little idea and give you some thoughts on some of the things that have taken place here in the last 20 years that I found really fascinating. But we left my former wife. Her name was Inez, and she had health issues. She got a brain hemorrhage when we were living in Florida, and she was about 40 years old when that happened. And we just moved down there with 5 children, and I moved from Massachusetts to Florida, and she had a brain hemorrhage, and they told me she wasn't even going to live. So they rushed her off. She was actually working for a small newspaper at the time, and she was taking a course at the college on journalism. And her car was broke down that day, so I went to pick her up at the school where she was. It was a college, Hillsborough College in Tampa. And so when I went to pick her up, they were wheeling her out and putting her in an ambulance. And I didn't even know it was her at first, but I ran up and I asked the professor. I said, what's going on? She says, your wife is in trouble. And my wife was yelling and screaming, my former wife, yelling and screaming, no blood, no blood. So they told me, the ambulance driver said, get in the car and follow us to the hospital. So I got in the car, followed them to the hospital. He had the sirens racing, the lights flashing. And halfway to the hospital, they shut the lights off and stopped the sirens. So I figured Inez died. So I got to the hospital, and she was still alive. But the nurse got me aside and said, Rick, your wife isn't going to make it. She's had a brain hemorrhage, and people don't survive with brain hemorrhages. They generally die. So she said, you better go home and get the kids, because I don't think she's going to make it. So he says, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'll just let it go. I don't want them to come and see her like this. So anyways, the brain surgeon came in, and he operated on Inez, and he said it was a miracle. It was a miracle that the bleeding stopped. It usually doesn't. He says usually when they get in there, the bleeding was so much that a person goes brain dead and dies. But he said the bleeding stopped on its own. So she recovered, and the only thing is she was always subject to seizures. And she never did like Florida. And she almost asked me every day if we could move back to Massachusetts. So we came back to Massachusetts, and we, of course, were also questioning the Watchtower at the time. And we just had enough of it. They were just not the organization. Her and I were doing a lot of research. We found out about the United Nations. We found about the child molestation problem. So my wife and I left, and we were both disfellowshipped. Actually, they disfellowshipped me and her at the same time, but they actually rescinded it for her. The governing body actually overturned it. They didn't disfellowship her because of her health issues, and that's an issue. That's something I always thought about. So even if a person is going to leave the Watchtower, bring up health issues, and you might get some cut. They might cut you loose on that one because they just don't want to be sued over it. But to cut to the story here on how we started the 6 screens. We were really frustrated over the Watchtower and giving them time, money, resources, and in finding out that they're really not an honorable religion, a scandalous religion. So she said, Rick, why don't we teach Christianity? Because her and I left the Watchtower really on the basis of their false teachings. So what we did is we studied the Bible a lot together, and we started a little house church. And how that started, and I can still remember, it was a Saturday in October, beautiful day, and I went to work, and she was subject to seizures, but that particular day I felt I could leave her there alone and she would be all right. And we had a big old house, and my 2 daughters moved out, so we had plenty of rooms. And upstairs where they were sleeping, I came home and I heard some scraping and a lot of noise going on upstairs. I thought my wife was having a seizure, because once in a while she would have a grand mal seizure, which she'd shake. So I went running upstairs. I thought she was having a seizure. So when I went running upstairs and looked in the bedroom, and she was moving furniture, of all things. She was moving furniture from one room to the next room. And I says, Inez, well, what are you doing? She says, well, Rick, we're going to start a ministry. We're going to start a Christian ministry. I says, we are? She says, we're going to do it right here. And where it's upstairs, we're going to call it the Upper Room Ministry. So she says, we can do that, and we can broadcast it and get people to come to our house, and we can start it. And I said, well, who's going to be the pastor? She says, well, you're going to be the pastor. I says, I am. So I said, oh, fine. So she said, we're going to meet here in 2 weeks. So we got some chairs, and we had a little meeting. And, the first meeting, we had about 12, 15 people show up. We did get as many as 23 show up. But then we're thinking, we really want to get more ex-witnesses to come to grips with Jesus, to understand the real Bible, not the Watchtower dictates. So what we did is she said, we really should start something where we expose the Jehovah's Witnesses. We should have like an exposure ministry to go along with our upper room ministry. I says, yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we could do some research and find out all of the things the Watchtower is hiding behind. So we did 2 years of really intensive research, and my daughter came back and was living with us, and she was a pretty high-tech girl, so she helped us with a website. So what we did is we started a website, and we called it the 6 Screens of the Watchtower. And so anyways, that's one of the biggest questions that I get here at the 6 Screens is, what is the 6 Screens of the Watchtower? Well, I'll tell you what they are. When we were designing the website, and the website back then was a lot better than it is now. It's under construction. We kind of didn't keep up with it. We got a lot of viewers at first. But when we were designing the 6 Screens website, we had to break down all of the information that we gathered about the Watchtower organization. Like chapters in a book, we came up with 6 categories to place our research in. Now, if you're going to write a book, you're going to have chapters, right? What are you going to call them? Well, we came up with 6 categories that we're going to place all of the information we found out about the Watchtower into. So using the term screen, and the basic meaning of it, definition, it's synonymous with curtain and concealment. We expose the Watchtower using 6 screens and reveal what they are hiding behind. We have categorized the world of Jehovah's Witnesses into 6 separate screens, and we broke it all down. So we said, well, what would be the screens? Well, what are the basic reasoning the Watchtower is hiding behind? Well, in screen 1, and we have 6 screens, so screen 1, all of the information we gathered on theological teachings and their real history, we put into screen 1. And this would be their false teachings. This would be their blood doctrine. This would be all of the foolish doctrines they have and policies in the Watchtower. And screen 2 was the dark and tainted secrets. And of course, we know there was many of them, right? With the child molestation problems and this covering things up all the time. And screen 3 was the occult connection. We realized the Watchtower was connected with the occult. And we realized that, even the very roots of the organization was very occultic, with Charles Taze Russell being involved with pyramidology. And then in screen 4, we learned, and we all have learned, that the Watchtower uses mind control and mental manipulation. So screen 4, we would try to explain how the Watchtower Society uses mind control to manipulate its followers. And screen 5 has to do with induced mental illness and elevated anxiety. And we know when a person becomes a witness, they make you feel so guilty. All of the mental issues that you have to deal with, anxiety problems, and people get to the point of feeling so guilty, many even kill themselves. And then sixth screen would be the business screen. And we've come to understand, and as we've been discussing here for 20 years, and we all know it, the Watchtower organization is nothing more than a business masquerading as a religion. So we launched that website. At the time we launched it, there was only 5 other websites that were out there explaining what was going on. Only 5 of them. Today's a lot. And at the time we went on YouTube, there was only 5 other YouTube channels exposing the Jehovah's Witnesses. So, in fact, at the time, YouTube was just bought by Google. And there wasn't a whole lot of people on YouTube. And, of course, they weren't doing live YouTube like we're doing here today. So we started out with a conference call. And I explained last night all about that and how we started getting people to call in. And if you weren't listening last night, I'll just reiterate how that happened. There was a man in Florida, and he was going to commit himself. He was going to commit suicide. And he was just disfellowship that day, and he went home. He's going to kill himself. And before he did it, he got in bed with his laptop, and he just figured he'd check a few things out. And he punched into his laptop, Jehovah's Witness disfellowship, because he just got disfellowshipped. And his wife and his mother, they were shunning him, and his life was just in turmoil, and he didn't know what to do. So I had a YouTube video. In fact, it's had 1 million views. And that YouTube was me standing out in front of a Kingdom Hall and talking about how I was disfellowshipped. And I actually had a recording, a secret recording, the first one ever done for an ex-witness, the first recording of a disfellowshipping judicial committee hearing. And he heard that, and he saw that I was happy and I had freedom. So he got a hold of me through YouTube. He wrote to me, and he said, "Could I come up to your house? I want to meet you, Rick." I said, "Yeah." So he says, "Can I come up next week?" He wanted to come up quick. So he says, "Yeah." I asked my wife, I says, "Can you come and stay with us?" So he came up, he stayed 4 days with us, and he told us that, it really saved his life, seeing that there were people that were free and they were living a good life after they left the Watchtower. So he came up with an idea. He was a wealthy businessman, by the way. He did really well, a very successful businessman. And what he did is he had a conference call. Now, at the time, there was no live YouTube or live Facebook. You had to do things through telephone calls. So he says, I have in my business, he had a bunch of people working for him. He says, we have a conference call line, and we can talk to each other in conferences. He says, why don't we do this, Rick? Why don't we start a program? And we'll call it the 6 Screens of the Watchtower Conference Call. And we can see if people would come in and talk about what it was like in the witness world and help people get out of it. So that's what we did. So what he did the first night we did it, he interviewed me. It was actually on a Friday night. So we had our 6 screens on Friday night, and he interviewed me, and I gave my whole story, my whole feelings about the Watchtower. Then the next week I interviewed him. But the sad part about it bothered him because we only brought 23 people in. So only 23 people would come in. He said, gee, Rick, I was hoping more people would listen in. He was hoping, maybe like thousands, I think. So I says, no, it takes time. It takes time. It takes time to get the ball rolling. So he says, why don't you just take it? Just take it and you work with it. You can keep my conference call number and you just do the program and see where it goes. So we've been doing it and we never gave up. And we've been here every Saturday night since. And, even at first, we have a lot of people now call in, as you heard here today in this program. And we have now live YouTube and Facebook. So, we have a lot of people listening in. But back then, I didn't know if people were listening in or not. When we first started, I'd start at 6:30 on a Saturday night, and I would go till like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would, just be talking, just everything I knew about the Watchtower and reading stuff from my website and the things that we researched. And I was just spilling the beans on them. And every once in a while, someone would call in. And even my wife would get up, my former wife would get up and say, Rick, is anybody listening into the program? I said, I think there's some people. Every once in a while, Inez, we get a few people coming through. So we just stayed at it. And more people kept calling in. And even though we got a bum rap, we got a bum rap, I must say that. What my former wife and I wanted to do, and we said it right at the very inception of coming up with this idea of the 6 screens. We said at the very inception that we want to hear everything. I want to hear everything. I want to hear everything about false prophecies. I want to hear everything about the Illuminati. I want to hear about the subliminal imagery. I want to hear about satanic ritual abuse. And because we went that far, it spooked a lot of people. A lot of people began to say that we were doing things and sensationalizing it. We were trying to get people to listen in, so we sensationalized it. And they heard things they never heard before, things like Enochian magic, that now even Barbara Anderson, just in the last month, has found out about that. We were talking about that 15 years ago, how the Watchtower is deeply instilled in the occult. But we got more and more listeners coming in, and more people began to connect with it. And this is where ex-Jehovah's Witnesses came to talk. And they liked the idea when we went on YouTube live, that was only in the last few years, and Facebook, that, people could now, and what an amazing thing that is. People can listen in live and in real time, and they call in from all over the world. And it really makes my heart glad. And, I've had 12 people that have told me, and I'm not just, throwing this out. This is a fact. 12 people have told me that the 6 screens have saved their life. They were going to commit suicide, just like that man that came up from Florida. He's one, but there's numerous other ones that have contacted me, and it saved their life. It gave them a voice. They never had a voice before. But the thing that they always remark, they say, Rick, it is so refreshing and so enlightening to hear the people calling in from all over the place. It keeps us on the edge of our seat. We never know what people are going to say, and you never know who's going to call in. We have all kinds of people call in. And back in 2010, in January of 2010, we got a call one night that really put the 6 screens on the map. And that call was by a man by the name, well, he wouldn't give his real name, but he said he was a bethelite, and he was calling in from a closet at Bethel. And even I was very skeptical. Wouldn't you be? And you could hardly hear him. He's like whispering. He's like, I can't talk too loud because I don't want anybody to hear me. He says, but I says, well, what is your name, sir? He's a young man, I could tell. And he says, well, I really can't give you a name. I says, well, I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to call you Johnny the Bethelite. And I'll tell you what, he would come on and share things with us. And because it was so original and so like, how could a guy be doing this? Won't he be found out about it? No, now there's a lot of Bethelites speaking out from the Watchtower. But back then, the first one got arrows in his back like a pioneer, right? But Johnny would would give us information that we never heard before. And it sounded like, what? Nobody could believe it. So Johnny got a bad rap, but he even had his own program called Jehovah's Underground here in the 6 screens. He had it for 5 years, and he'd come on, and people would question him and ask him certain things. No, he's not a Bethelite. He can't be a Bethelite. And but I'll tell you what, we never know what happened to Johnny, and he was on with us for 6 years. And then the last call we had with Johnny, he was talking about the kiddie porn ring and how the governing body was involved with all of this stuff. And then that's the last we heard of Johnny. But I'll tell you what, he really made the network. He really helped so many people to come in because they wanted to hear what Johnny the Bethelite said. So it's been 20 years of exposing them. And I look back and I try to think of some of the stories that were the most infamous, or the ones that really stuck in my head. And I often think of, we had a woman come on once, and she actually wrote me an email and said she wanted to come on and tell her story. She said, Rick, people won't believe me, but I want to tell it. And working on the premise that I want to hear everything everyone has to say about the Watchtower. She said she wanted to talk about what goes on with automatic writing. And what that is it's demonic writing. The demons actually dictate to a person what to write, and they'll write it in a notebook. So this girl, her name was Raven Giuliani. And she came on, and even before she came on, people must have got wind of it. And I got people calling me, Rick, don't bring that girl on. You bring that girl on, it's going to ruin your website. It's going to ruin the 6 screens. People won't believe what she has to say. I said, no, we're going to bring her on. But she came on and she told us when she was a little girl, she was probably now in her late 20s, early 30s. But she said when she was 10, 12 years old, that she would go down to, her father worked at Bethel, and he knew a lot of the mucky mucks there. And she would go there quite often with him. They lived in New Jersey. They'd travel into New York, and they'd go to the Brooklyn headquarters, 25 Columbia Heights. And what she said is that they would take her down in the tunnels. And when she mentioned that, everybody had a heart attack. There's no tunnels. There's no tunnels under the ground there. She's making this up, Rick. Well, come to find out, there was tunnels. When they sold the building off 25 Columbia Heights to Trump, remember, about 8-10 years ago, maybe not even that now, but there was tunnels under the ground. So she said that they took her. No one heard of tunnels under the ground before. So they took her down these tunnels, and some of the officials in the writing department would listen to what she had to say, but she was writing under the guise and auspices of the demons. And, people heard that and said, that is crazy stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, that call got so many people listening, it spooked a lot of people out. But, come to find out, friends, we know the Watchtower is steeped into the occult, and the demons thrive in there. And if you're not even a Christian listening in today, don't go nutty. I know that the Christians understand demonism, but there's bad things that happen in the world. There's a lot of evil, and being a Christian, it helps you understand where this evil comes from. So even if you don't quite get the devil and the occultic stuff, trust me when I tell you, the Watchtower is deeply steeped into the occult. And we had Barbara Anderson, who everyone adores Barbara. I mean, there's no question about it. I say she's the biggest apostate that ever lived. There's no question about it. And Barbara contacted me, and I've known her for years, and she contacted me 3 years ago. And she said, Rick, I would like to write a book, but I'm getting old. And she said, I don't have enough space. It would take too much time. She said, I want to leave my footprints here on the 6 screens. Now, this is a very credible person. Barbara Anderson is not in any way going to exaggerate or embellish or enhance. She speaks it like it is. And Barbara said she wanted to come on and have her own program and talk about what she knows and what goes on behind the curtains. Now, if you guys were listening in just a month ago, Barbara came in when she was working at Bethel. She said she gathered a number of letters that were written to the Watchtower Society. And in these letters, people were asking the Watchtower certain questions. And some of the stuff she was reading, she says, Rick, no one's ever heard this before. This is exclusive. Your audience is hearing this for the first time. She had us on the edge of the seat, and she was reading letters. She was reading about how one family, there was incest going on big time. And, what do we do about it? And how do we handle it? And then also, evidently, a lot of people in the Watchtower have dissociative disorder. That is like multiple personality. And Barbara had letters about that, on how people writing in because their personality has been altered because of child sex abuse. And she was bringing up things that really were having us sit, as I say, on the edge of our seat. But she brought something up that really connected with me. And it has to do with, would the Watchtower even murder someone to cover something up? And, you know, if I said that, no one would believe me. But when Barbara said, yes, that could very well happen, people believe her. And I brought up last night the story of David Carter. And David Carter came on our program years ago, 15 years ago, and he said that his sister and the elders tried to kill him. And, you know, nobody believed David Carter. Nobody believed him. And, you know, he would tell that story and how he was given rat poison when he was a little boy to keep his mouth shut about him being raped when he was a little kid. And so they were trying to kill him. And everybody said, Rick, that is a made up story. That's ridiculous. But we want to hear everything that goes on behind the curtains, as we say. So anyways, that story was certainly solidified and made credible. One night when David was on, he talked about it. And then the following week, a detective called up who has been seen many times on the America's Most Wanted program. Remember that? With John Walsh, his son was killed in Florida, and he had a program called America's Most Wanted. Well, there was a man that appeared often on that program. His last name was Bernstein. I don't have his first name in front of me. I think it was David too. But anyways, Mr. Bernstein called into the program a week after David Carter was on. And he said, everything that David Carter said is true. They poisoned him. He brought it right out. He said the elders in the congregation poisoned him, trying to kill him. And there was a lawsuit being filed. And whether it was ever settled, I don't know, but it was kind of like a secret lawsuit as well. But this man, Bernstein, was a credible person. And everybody was just in awe, like, what? This guy called into the 6 screens and says everything this man said was true. Friends, I can only tell you, the Watchtower organization is more evil, is more destructive than you would ever think. There's more involved in this organization than we can even put our finger on. And that's why now many countries are investigating them. They're investigating the witnesses because of all of this shunning, all of the sexual child abuse cover-ups. The Watchtower has nowhere to go. They are on the verge of a major collapse. And I know you guys say, Rick, you're looking through rose-colored glasses, but I'll tell you what, if you got onto our website, we've been counting down the last days of the Watchtower for 2 decades. And we're going to continue to count them down until we see this organization gone. Well, that's, basically what I have to say. If anyone wants to speak up, you're on with us. We got about 10 minutes here. Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more thought. I wanted to make it last night when you were talking about, murder or, the Watchtower capable of that. And what I wanted to say, it's not normal for Toni Morris to say, won't you be glad when they're all dead? That a psychiatrist would see that person and say that's a psychopath. And then not only say that, I know I've said it before and we've heard it a million times, but not only smile while I was saying it and grinning while I was saying it, but yet to say I want to emphasize it and light a match and blow it out. To think he's talking about ethnic cleansing, to think he's talking about genocide is sickening, because if you have the mind of Christ, you don't wish anybody dead. You wish everybody to have transformation. So I just wanted to say that it's not above them. It's not above them. And I want to say this too, Rick. I don't know why I feel led to say this, but John Wayne made an interesting point earlier. He said, when you leave the Kingdom Hall, be careful. What I've found, I've went to a lot of different churches. There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of crazy ones. It's all over the place. But I want to say this about a church. A church is a place for a possible transformation. Many of them in there are sick, right? And so that's the witnesses. That's a lot of the churches. You go there to get well. And that's why what John Wayne made a point was to be careful when you go around, because I've been screwed by just as many of those other places. And I'm not saying they're all bad, because they're not. But spiritual transformation happens spiritually. And so if you go into one of those places, being aware that there's pedophiles in there, that there's sex addicted people in there, that there's alcoholics in there, you're going to be way ahead of the game than just walking in blinded, thinking this is a holy place. Does that make sense, Rick?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense, Dan. Yes, it does.
Yeah. So I just want to make aware, because man, I've been in so many places and I'm like, man, there's no transformation here. There's no love here. And that's why I realized when Jesus said you'd know them by their fruits, that those spiritual gifts are not of this world. They're not of religion. They're from a spiritual dimension. So if we carry those spiritual things, the love, joy, the peace, the harmony, loving everybody, then we're that. But I just wanted to say that, just fair warning, as you travel, as you search for that truth, you go into the churches, different places, just know there are places for possible transformation. Anyway, Rick, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And I want to say I appreciate your point, and also along with your point, Christ said, "You will know my people by their fruits." He didn't say you'll know my religion. You will know the name of my religion by their fruits. No, my people, my followers.
Beautiful.
So we as individuals can be his followers, and we can let our fruit be seen. And I thank you for that.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you.
And Rick, also I want to say thank you too for explaining it. I love this program. It's probably one of the best I've enjoyed for a long time, because all these years I had a partial explanation about the 6 screens, what it meant, but you gave it so clearly and so in detail. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate being a part of it all these years and having several different programs on your program, your network. And thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome.
Happy anniversary.
Well,
Happy anniversary, Rick, on your show.
Well, thank you, Dan. No, we've actually had 93 unique programs, Larry. You had 3 programs I can remember. And so you were involved with us right in the very beginning, but we've had 93 unique programs. Some of them are still running to this day. But Larry, you always did a very, very good job. We always love to have you with us. Well, that just about does it, I guess. Well, we got 2 minutes left. If anyone wants to make any comments, we're so glad that we've been able to. Yeah, go ahead. You with us?
Oh, just real quick. I was thinking, so I was surprised you mentioned Johnny the Bethelite. Do you still have an opinion on, do you think the Watchtower whacked him, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I know, Mike, you're not going to agree with it all. So, I mean, I know you're just trying to, rub it in, so to speak. But I have my opinion. No. I mean, you have your opinion. I have mine. But I mean, I have to tell you something. When you have an organization worth $7 billion, and someone's spilling the beans big time on you, that could create some monumental issues, it wouldn't be too uncommon that person doesn't hang around too long. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, there's no evidence that they whacked him, Rick. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, well, there's no evidence. I can't, if you're going to present a story, you have to have the burden of proof. I can't prove it. But then on the other hand, you can't disprove it either. But, when a man just goes blank on you.
Well, I'm not the one making any claims. It's other people. I mean, maybe not you specifically, but other people have said they believe they whacked them. I'm not saying, I'm not the one making the allegations. The people that, there's no evidence that this happened. You don't even know his name.
Yeah.
Does anybody know for sure if anybody really whacked Jimmy Hoffa? Or is there really proof of that? So if we compare the proof of Jimmy Hoffa, at least there wasn't any proof for many years. So, but we basically know the story, and I think we could come to the conclusion, whether it's true or not. Something did happen to Johnny the Bethelite, whatever his name was, and if he just left, he could have found his way back to the 6 screens to tell us the story.
Right. Well, it's hard to really. The only thing is, what happens is people will make, comments about Johnny the Bethelite that might have only heard him on 1 or 2 programs. The man was with us for 6 years. He called my wife and I personally lots of times, got to know his family members and everything, not directly, but through him. So, you have to just take, we feel that not everybody would, because they don't have the connection that my wife and I have had with Johnny. So that's how we feel that way. Yeah.
I agree with you, Rick. And one more thing about knowing something may be true. I knew Raven very well, and so I know her. She's a credible person. I met her in person. I got to know her. So what she said, I truly believe whatever she said. What happened?
Yeah, well, thank you, Larry, for saying that. It's at first, right now, what you have is you do have a lot of things that people have been finding out about the Watchtower in the last couple of years, and it goes back to what we were speaking about years ago, and it really something that makes me concerned, because we got a bad rap based on what we said years ago, but now people are coming to understand that did happen. Some of this stuff did happen in the Watchtower. Thank you, Larry. Well, we're going to go to we got our other program coming up here. For some reason, I don't see them on here. I got to send them a link. So I've been trying to do that and talking Jugum here at the same time. But I want to thank everyone for coming into the program today. And I want to thank all the people that have called in, all the people in the chat group here, all of those people have made the Six Screens possible for 20 years, and thank you very much. And stay with us now. We have a program called The Christian Court coming up next, right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. So don't go anywhere. We're going to shut this program down now, and we'll go to the next program. Thank you again for coming in and being with us today, and thank you, Anne Marie, for letting us come on your program and share our stories. We're going to end it here. All right, let's do that. Now I got to go to the other studio.